Good morning, everybody. So it is just after 12:05, so I think we're good to go ahead and get started. We gave folks an extra minute or two to jump on the stream this morning. Looks like we've got a couple of people watching, which is cool. If you guys are in the chat, feel free to say hi. Tell me where you guys are from. Maybe how long you guys have been watching the channel, which would be kind of a cool thing just to hear. I'm sure that there's a little bit of lag. I know that there's a lag on the live streams, but I think this one should actually work fairly well. Figured out the way to actually get the live stream software OBS to actually hook into the specific event as opposed to just going live, which is nice. So this live stream is going to be generally about sort of just first looks with Ubuntu LTS 20.04. So I'm sure that most of the people who are watching this are aware, but Ubuntu is probably the most, it looks like my audio is a little bit hot. Let me go turn this down a little bit. There we go. So no, that seems, all right. Hopefully that's a little bit better. So, so this stream is going to be about Ubuntu LTS, just sort of first look, first reaction, and kind of getting an idea of what it is about, what's changed, if it's particularly interesting, and just kind of going through it. So I'm sure most of you guys who watch this stream are aware Ubuntu is arguably the most popular distribution of Linux out there, and it's also one of the three distributions that I recommend that people start off with if they are new to Linux. So I'm going to go jump over to my sort of kind of main screen over here. So I'm over here at releases.ubuntu.com/20.04, where you can go ahead and download the beta from. So the 20.04 release is not actually out as of this time. I am making the video as of April 19th, 2020. So it should be out in the next few days officially. I think the 23rd is the day that this actually comes out. As a final release, but you have the image you can go ahead and download as a beta, and generally speaking, by the time we get to a beta for the LTS releases, it's pretty stable. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this and kind of go through it. I think what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go do an install in a virtual machine, and we'll kind of go look at some of the release notes, and we'll talk about it sort of generally. Now, another thing that I'm sure that most of you guys are probably aware is the way that the release cycle works for Ubuntu, and a lot of distributions that are based on it is basically they have sort of a cycle. So they have their LTS release, and then they have a standard release. Right. So basically, the idea is your LTS is going to come out basically every 2 years. And it's going to go ahead and have basically 5 years support. So this is basically what you're going to want to use on your servers. Now, standard releases come out every 6 months. Right. Or I should say releases come out every 6 months. Every 2 years, one of those releases is an LTS. So they don't have like an additional release that's a standard release in parallel or anything like that. So standard releases come out every 6 months, and then these are for like new features. Right. So these are not designed to be particularly stable. And because of that, personally, I don't care about standard releases. I have absolutely no interest in them. For me, being on the absolute bleeding edge is not a thing that I want to do. I'm mainly interested in stability. I'm mainly interested in longevity, and not having to go rip things out and put them back in. So, generally what I do is I hop on the LTS releases usually maybe about a year or so after they're actually released. So I'm not immediately going to go to, 20.04 for my servers, right? Maybe not a year, probably maybe like 6 months or so. It's more like what I'd be doing. Certainly, I'm going to wait until a point release. And so what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go wait for, 18 or 20, I should say, .04.01, right? Something along those lines. And then I'm going to go ahead and be more comfortable using it in production environments. And the reason for that is our old release, 18.04, is still out and still available and still going to be supported for quite some time. If at some point you take one of my classes, or if you've taken one of my classes for like LPI Introduction to Linux kind of stuff, I base those on 18.04. And the reason why was I wrote them last year, right? So it was still out, still supported, and I wanted the long-term support. So I'm probably going to go keep that on 18.04 for certainly a while anyway, because it's still going to be valid. It's still going to work really nicely, and we'll be good to go. So one of the nice things about LTS releases and that sort of paradigm is that it has a very slow, incremental approach to adding new features and things. So there's not a huge amount of instability in systems, right? So it's designed more for reliability. Now, there are a couple things in the new release that I'm particularly excited about. Really, there's one main one that I'm pretty excited about, which is ZFS, or to the rest of the world who's not the United States, ZFS. Right? And that is something I am very much looking forward to, because ZFS is a really, really, really good file system. It's enterprise grade. It's what they used in Solaris, or still use in Solaris. It's what we use in FreeBSD. And for anybody who's been excited about BTRFS or ButterFS or BetterFS, or however you want to say whatever that is, right? BTRFS is basically targeting ZFS, right? They said, well, ZFS exists. It's really good. We don't have an equivalent in Linux. So let's go ahead and try to go ahead and implement a new file system that has a lot of those features. But ZFS has been around for like 10 years now. So they're very, ahead of something like BTRFS, and they're also very, 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 very stable. So the reason why I'm excited about that is things like snapshots. Snapshots are incredibly useful. If you've ever worked in an environment where you had access to like an enterprise storage system like a NetApp, and you have the ability to go ahead and just roll an entire file system back, instantaneously, or roll back an entire database instantaneously. This is very similar to that kind of thing. If you're coming from more of a Windows background and you're familiar with shadow copies, the idea of having versioning built into the file system is very handy. So this is the same idea, and the snapshots there are going to work really, really nicely. So I thought what I would do is at first kind of pull this up, and we could just go ahead and take a look at some of the release notes. And I know that some of you guys are going to get triggered by the fact that I use Edge as a web browser in my videos. It's because I'm pretty confident that I don't have any, stock information or banking account information up on there ahead of time. So, and actually, it works fine for the most part. So we have the kind of the main page. Unfortunately, they don't have a release notes doc built into this. If I go to just releases.ubuntu.com, we'll see what they have here. Now, so I just have a page for that, and then they have links to the various different sort of derivatives. One of the things that you'll see is that there's a bunch of old derivatives or not a bunch of alternative derivatives of Ubuntu that you can go ahead and use. And you can see that there's also like 19.10 previous release that we had out there, and before that we have 18.04. So if I go to this other tab that I pulled up here previously, which just sort of summarizes a lot of the features, I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of go through the features. So the code name for this is what is it? Fossil. Focal fossa. It's apparently a kind of a cat-like animal. That's another thing I don't care about. I don't pay attention very much to the code names. So I'm getting in the chat that the audio is really high. Let me see if I can turn it down. Is that any better? I've noticed OBS does this occasionally, where it'll just sort of freak out with the microphone. So let me know in the chat if that seemed to have made a difference, because I turned it down pretty substantially. I just want to make sure that you guys can still hear me. All right, I'm going to kind of assume that it is. I know that there's a bit of a lag in the chat, so it's I think whenever I say something, it takes a minute or so for it actually to stream out on video until you guys actually see it. So there might be a bit of a lag. So hopefully that audio change did make a difference. And yeah, so there's a new theme. So for folks who are using this as a desktop, we'll take a look at that. GNOME 3.3.6. They got rid of Amazon integration. So a lot of people really disliked this. So the idea is that there was a plugin for Firefox and for the search that was built into Ubuntu, where if you did a search for something, it would search your local stuff, but it would also search for like products on Amazon, which would be giving your information out, right? Because it'd be showing what you were searching for to a third party. And I think that was a legitimate complaint. I always found that was very easy to disable, so it wasn't that big of a deal for me. But I can understand how people dislike that, and I think that's probably a good thing that they removed it. I know just from having worked with Canonical, I did, and theoretically still do. I haven't had a class from them in a while, but do training for Canonical, and I know from people that I used to work with over there that was a pretty decent source of funding for them. So they did get a bit of money from that, which was helpful. So hopefully they've figured out some alternative means to replace that. Because whatever you think of Ubuntu, they do contribute a lot to the Linux community. So Linux kernel 5.4 looks like that they're going to be using the ZFS install support, as we talked about before. And then they've gotten rid of Python 2 support. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't love the whole schism that happened with Python generally. I think that's I don't have any problem with Python, but it's not my favorite language. And one of the things I think that factors into that is just how clunky the transition has been between Python 2 and Python 3. So I guess this is sort of in line with the Python 3 kind of just being the way that we're going forward. They're not going to be looking at Python 2. Everybody should have been upgrading their stuff by now. But it feels like it would be nice to have that built in, and just be something that could be easily detectable. I'm not really sure why they didn't just call the binaries Python 2 and Python 3, and then just have them, or point back, so you could have had that defined in the script itself. New wallpapers, which I don't care about, and then pretty straightforward to go ahead and get. So nothing too crazy. I think for me the main thing I'm looking at is the improved ZFS support. So Another thing that I'm going to go ahead and do, which I'm sure will trigger some people, is I'm going to go ahead and pull up Hyper-V because I want a Windows box, and it's built in and it's free. And if you want to go use Docker, that's what you generally going to go use on this. If you're not using the Windows subsystem for Linux, which I am, and is great. But anyway, let's go ahead and create a new video, or not a new video, but a new VM. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Quick Create, and it's going to go ask me for installations. So we see that we've got some predefined ones. I'm going to go pick a local installation source, change my installation source to downloads, where we have the Ubuntu 20.04 beta. Select open, and then I'm going to go click on create virtual machine. So actually, let me go look at the options. Default switch is fine. Okay, that seems all right. So let's go look at the settings for this. See how much memory it gave it. Let's go bump that up to 4. All right, that looks okay. How big is the hard drive? Yeah, we'll get rid of that. Okay, I'm sure it's fine for a just a test system. We're gonna say apply, click OK, and then we're gonna go connect. And then this is turned off, so we're gonna go click on start. Okay. So that's one of the first things that you'll notice is that the actual logo of the vendor whose system you're running on actually gets loaded. I'll zoom that in a little bit. That's a little weird. That should be booting off of that. Boot from DVD. Let's try to power that back on again. I'm sure this is riveting. And let's go ahead and start this guy back up again. Hopefully this time it'll pick up the correct virtual machine. And weirdly, it looks like it's expecting a Pixie boot, which is odd. All right, let me go blow that away. And delete this. Try that again. Downloads to. All right, we'll just go leave it everything the default. Last time I did this, it worked fine. So hopefully it'll pick it up this time. Oh man, that's so weird. Nothing's ever easy. All right, so let's try this. I'm going to go to my downloads. I'm going to go copy this. Go to my QNAP. And download. See how long this will take to copy over. Images hash and certificate are not allowed. That's interesting. Ah, it's UEFI. I wonder if that's why. Yeah. Okay. Stop this. Okay. So let's try that. I bet that was it. There we go. There we go. All right. So here we go. Let me go well, I'll let that keep going in the background. So we're going to go ahead and do install Ubuntu, and we're going to go walk through our standard Ubuntu installer, which is pretty straightforward. There we go. Somebody saw that in the chat. Thanks for that. I got to monitor the chat better. So, all right, cool. I'm used to VirtualBox. I don't use Hyper-V very often. So, all right, so we get this booting up. Can just take a second while we get into our installer. I'm sure it'll be pretty straightforward. Really the main thing that I want to go look at is the ZFS piece of this. I'm going to go click on continue. And then continue because I'm sure that the keyboard layout is fine. And I'm not going to go ahead and install the updates while I'm doing Ubuntu because I figure it's probably better not to have that extra download while we're trying to do our live stream. I'm going to go click on continue, and then I'm going to go click on advanced features for this. So there it has experimental, erase disk, and use ZFS. Alternatively, we have use LVM with the new Ubuntu installation. Now, with a lot of file systems, you would use a logical volume manager, and then you would install the file system on top of that. With a lot of modern file systems like ZFS, and I think BTRFS does this as well. In fact, I'm 90% sure that it does. The logical volume management aspect is built into the file system as well. So one of the really nice things with a file system like ZFS or BTRFS is you can go ahead and do things like add drives to it, or manage RAID through the file system itself, which is pretty neat. So I'm going to go ahead and click on experimental, erase disk, and use ZFS, and that was pretty straightforward, right? So if I go to something else, create and resize partitions. So let's go ahead and click on install now. And all right, so I was hoping that it would import whatever the layout was, because I think that would have been an interesting thing to see. But let's go create a new partition table. I'm going to go say continue. And then we're going to go ahead and say select this. All right. So we have to select. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. We really didn't do anything particularly fancy specific to ZFS here. Although I'm not seeing it listed out here, which is interesting. All right, so that's a little bit quirky. Hopefully that'll be something that they clean up. So I'm going to go back, and I'm just going to go ahead and do the ZFS selected one, and then we'll just do install now. So we'll see how that long that takes. Hopefully it'll be fairly quick. And say Los Angeles. I'm going to say Nick. And I'm going to go say Nick to make it super secure. I'm going to have it log in automatically, which of course you should never do on a real system. And that's just going to go copy the files over, and then should get that set up. So while that is running, I figured we could go ahead and sort of talk to the folks in the chat a little bit. If you guys are listening, and hopefully you are, because otherwise it'd be weird if you're just sort of watching this. Where's everybody from? You guys could type in the chat where in the world you guys are watching this from. And out of curiosity, how long have you been watching the channel? And are you guys in IT professionally? Yeah, just sort of generally kind of what's going on with everybody. Sort of curious. As for myself, things are going pretty well. I've got a shirt to make myself look professional, and I've got pajama pants on because it's quarantine. I've got some kids playing outside out the window, which I don't think are being picked up in the microphone, although it was being pretty loud earlier, apparently. So it might have been. If they did, hopefully not. Yeah, so they're cool though. They're my neighbors. We've got a lawn outside, so it's nice for them to be able to go ahead and play, in a yard somewhere. They haven't been too loud. Ah, cool, Poland. Whereabouts in Poland? I am jealous of your access to Poroshkis. Yeah, I know you've been with the channel for a long time. You're my my one and only patron, which I appreciate. So yeah, it's really neat to see people who've been watching for a while. I had somebody comment in the last live stream that they were watching on like one of the first videos, or they were watching like before 100 subscribers, and they were like, "Damn, you can live stream now. That's crazy." It's always neat to kind of see that. So how about the rest of you guys? I know we've got at least, according to YouTube, there's like 9 people watching. So the rest of you guys are just being quiet, or maybe you're on like TVs or other kind of devices. That's what I always do. Is I always watch YouTube from my TV now. I don't watch it on the computer very often, which is probably not the greatest idea, given that it's probably sending all sorts of analytics and stuff. I think that would probably be another good video to go do at some point, where maybe look at one of the open source kind of media players. I had Kodi for a while, but I found it a little bit clunky. So that might be something. But looks like we're starting to get there with the Ubuntu install. It's amazing how different installs are now compared to, when I was first getting started with this stuff. It was literally like you were going to dedicate an entire day to to getting the Linux set up. Sometimes even more than that. Like when I really first started, back when I was trying to get Linux installed on my Macintosh Performa, back in the mid 90s somewhere, late 90s, I guess. I mean, it was a thing. The time it took to download the stuff was crazy. If you're lucky, you could get somebody to mail it to you. If they had a whole bunch of floppies and could clone them for you. Basically, what I'm saying is I'm old. Is effectively what it is. So yeah. So actually, probably a good thing to go do while we're doing this, while that install is running, is to pull up the browser, and I'm just going to go open up a new tab. Actually, I can just go reuse this one. and I'll just do a search for a ZFS cheat sheet. So the way that ZFS works is it creates these pools of disks, which are sort of like file system containers, sort of like the logical volume. And actually, this is probably a good thing to go do. Is the FreeBSD handbook? They've been using ZFS for ages as part of FreeBSD, and their documentation is really good. So they probably have really good documentation on that. I just saw that this is a ZFS cheat sheet, so that looks like it's probably a nice one to go look at as well. So let's see. Virtual devices, zpool create. So we're really not going to have to go do that because this is going to be all done for us. But we can certainly do a zpool list and stuff when that first spins up. And so this is creating a mirrored storage pool. So that's nice. Go search down for snapshots. So this is creating a snapshot called test. So we're going to go do ZFS snapshot, and then basically you have like the root of your snapshot, and then you have basically the file system, and then the snapshot name. So here we can then go ahead and do a rollback. So basically it's going to be my ZFS calling it test. So usually you give it something that's kind of descriptive as to like what you were using the name for. So Adrian's saying, Italy, only watched a couple of your videos, honestly, but then again, I only found it this month. Well, that's cool, man. Welcome aboard. Hopefully things are getting a little bit better over there in Italy. I know you guys have had it pretty tough during the quarantine. And the pandemic too, just sort of generally. I mean, the quarantine is probably the least of the problems. I hope everybody over there and your family and friends are all safe and healthy. I'm in Los Angeles. We got pretty lucky with it. They shut things down fairly early, and I think in the state of California, we've only had like something like 700 deaths, which is pretty remarkable given the size of the state and the cities. I mean, Los Angeles is here, San Francisco here, and San Diego are all really big cities. So, knock on wood, we've been doing pretty good so far, and hopefully it'll get better. So ZFS promote, basically ZFS promote is going to go ahead and basically clone snapshot. So it's basically going to make it like a real snapshot as opposed to sort of a clone. So it's a really, really nice thing to do. It's the commands are a little bit clunky when you get started with ZFS. I know that there are some wrappers that people have written to kind of make it a little bit easier, but generally it's not that difficult. And once you kind of get used to it, it's pretty nice. Mainly the snapshot stuff is fantastic. It's also phenomenal for backups. So snapshots are not backups in and of themselves, but we can go ahead and send data in a block format between one location and another location. And even though that doesn't sound like that big of a deal, it actually dramatically increases efficiency when you're doing transfers. Because if you think about it, if you get something like a like let's say like a robocopy or like an rsync, right? When you get something like an rsync, what it needs to go do is it needs to go index through all of your files, right, and go ahead and look at things like timestamps, right? So we've got another file system over here, and we're trying to go figure out what's there. So if we don't have a file over here, that's easy, just send it, right? So something like an rsync, really good with things like, okay, we have these files, but we don't have those files, or if this file got deleted, right, we can go ahead and then delete a file over there, right? So really, really good with that kind of stuff. But let's say for the rest of these files, right, they've been modified, right? So they exist over here, but they're different. So what they need to go do is they need to go look at all these different files and go look at the timestamp. Right, so we look at the timestamps in those files, and then we go compare them to the timestamps over here. And if they're different, then basically what we need to go do is we need to go ahead and do some checksums, right? So actually do like, let's say an MD5. Right. So assuming that these are different, then what we're going to go do is we're going to divide these in half, and then we're going to do an MD5 on each one of those halves, right, to go ahead and see which half is different. And let's say it's, this part has been different. That's changed. We're going to have to go iterate through that again and again and again to go ahead and, find out what piece of the file system has changed. Whereas if we're transferring things over at the block level, basically what's going to happen is we're going to have a file, and this file is going to have pointers to various different blocks that make up the data in that file. And we're going to have a file over here, which is going to basically have, right? So what we can do is we can just go look at the blocks that have changed, right? So these all have addresses on them. So I'm just going to go say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Obviously, those aren't going to be like real, addresses. These are going to be pointers to the locations on disk, right? But let's say that these are 1, 2, 3, 7, 5. Well, okay, this block is different. Send this block over. Now we're done. So way, way, way simpler on the indexing. And if you've ever had to go do something like an rsync of, let's say, 10 million files, right? Which sounds like a lot, but is actually not that unusual. What'll happen is oftentimes it'll take as long to go figure out what to transfer as to actually do the transfer, especially if they're really small files, which is often the case if you're doing, millions and millions of them. So the ability to go ahead and move things around in a binary format between systems is really handy. So that's a pretty cool thing that we have the ability to go ahead and do with this, which is pretty neat. So, all right, well, looks like we're almost done with this. So it's getting there. All right, cool. Now we get the restart. So we'll do restart there. Make sure that we eject our disk. May have done that too soon. All right, so let's turn that off. Start it up again. And hopefully we should have the new one. All right, so while that's booting, how many of you guys currently work in IT, out of curiosity? Or are you guys like trying to get into the industry? There we go. I was worried for a second. Probably because we only gave it 2 gigs of RAM. Oh, here's another question for you guys. So I mentioned this in the last video, but one of the things I've been thinking about doing is trying to do something to kind of help people who have been laid off in this. And so what I'm thinking I'm going to go do is maybe do some free Linux classes on like the weekends. So maybe do like 2 weekends out of the month, do like a 4-day intensive introduction to Linux class in order to kind of get people started. So I don't know. Have any of you guys been laid off? How many of you guys know people who have been laid off who are either like just getting started in IT or we're like trying to transition to tech, things like that? Because I want to do something that will be helpful to people. I know a lot of people are hurting right now, but I also don't want to, dedicate 2 weekends a month if it's not going to really help people. But if you guys know of people who might be interested in that, who are unemployed, you can, maybe shoot me an email. So, Kevin Ronson Duncan says, I work in IT, or I work in it, pun intended. And then Delete This said, started last month just before the corona outbreak in my country. Pretty lucky, I guess. Yeah, no, that's definitely lucky. It's really helpful to be able to at least have some stuff on your resume. Because one of the things that may end up happening is that if the economy really crashes, there's a good chance that people will get laid off. And unfortunately, usually what happens is the last person in is the first person out. So, there's a good chance, not that you would get laid off, but it's more likely that the new person gets laid off than somebody who's been there for 10, 15 years. But having it already on your resume is massively useful because that'll help getting another job. So, but yeah, knock on wood, nobody's getting laid off. So I'm gonna go skip setting up an account, but it's nice that they have this sort of built in there, and I really like the fact that they have Nextcloud available there. Ubuntu does have single sign-on, which is actually fairly nice. That's part of their, I think it was Ubuntu 1 initially, and I forget what they're calling it now. But yeah. So this is another thing that I think is kind of interesting. So they have the ability to go ahead and set up live patch. This used to be something that was only available if you had an account with Canonical. So it looks like this is just now going to be a standard part of the distribution. So that's a pretty cool thing. I'm excited about that. That means less rebooting of servers. Okay, so we do still need to go use an Ubuntu 1 account. So I'm going to go cancel that for right now. And ask asking if you want to go ahead and give information to Canonical. So normally I don't send a lot of information back to vendors, but being that this is a beta and they're still in the final process of getting this set up and installed, I am in fact going to go ahead and send system information to Canonical, especially given that it's only a virtual machine. And then finally, location services, I am going to go leave off because I'm just doing this as a demo, and I don't think that we need to have anything here. So yeah, this is pretty straightforward as the initial kind of setup. I think this is very helpful for new users when you first kind of get on here. I always sort of think it's interesting to see exactly what applications they have as sort of the default applications. I do like Krita. Krita is actually quite nice as sort of a painting tool. I do think it's interesting that Visual Studio, Skype, Spotify, Slack, Android Studio, Plex, and Discord are all corporate-backed product or services, just from like an open source standpoint. So Kevin is asking, do I know how LivePatch actually works? I haven't actually looked into it a huge amount. My assumption would be that it loads the pieces of the kernel that change into RAM, and then swaps them out. But that's something I probably actually probably should look into. So Adrian is saying, I would like to start working in IT. I started studying for the LPI the other day without the material on the site. I already know a bit in Linux in general, but the road ahead is pretty long. Yeah, definitely. It takes, I still feel like I've been doing this for over 20 years and still feel like I'm only just scratching the surface of Linux. The thing I'm curious about is I wonder if these are actually, if I click on these, if they'll actually take me to the store. Maybe not. Okay. So, all right, those are some more ones they have there, and I can go ahead and click done. And I'm going to say remind me later, just so we don't use up the bandwidth. So, all right, so far it's pretty decent. One of the things I don't love about Ubuntu is that they don't have a terminal in the bar by default. I know that's such a really small thing, but that to me says a little bit about the tone of a Linux distribution. It's like, are you assuming that the people are going to be using a terminal? And for me, if you're using Linux, the terminal is kind of where it's at. So add that to favorites. I will say I know it's always a very personal choice, but I do think that the desktop from Canonical looks pretty nice. It's more or less just GNOME, but it's a fairly decent sort of version of this. So let me go ahead and look at settings. I'll go ahead and go to appearance or color. No, that's not what we want. Appearance over here. I'm going to click on dark. I like the dark a little bit better. So, all right, make this a little bit smaller. Okay. So we've got our terminal up here. Let's go ahead and Shift Control plus that to make it a little bit bigger. Hopefully you guys can read it. You pull list. So we've got our B pool and R pool. That's interesting. Ugh, so much snap. All right, so you see how they have this this R pool here. So the way that this works, it looks like they have things set up, is they have a B pool, which is the pool that we're booting off of, and then we have the R pool, which is the root of our file system. And then underneath that, they have all of these different file systems. So they have rpool/root/ubuntu var www, var lib dpackage. Basically, these are all sort of broken out into separate file systems, which is kind of interesting. And it's this is kind of one of the things I do like and dislike about ZFS is it sort of it makes it a little bit kind of awkward in terms of the do this. The file systems, right? So everything is sort of underneath this R pool, right? And you can see how they're sort of broken out kind of like this. I can actually probably just do so yeah, so we get slash over here, which is on this Ubuntu kind of thing. And then we have user data for root. We got var log sort of broken out. We've got my home directory underneath the user data kind of section. So it's kind of an interesting sort of layout here. So if we go ahead and do zpool, let's see, was it snapshot create? I haven't done ZFS in a while. Actually, I do. ZFS snapshot, and then yeah, file system at snapshot name. So typically at the bottom of man pages, they will have examples. So usually what I do is I just kind of go right towards the bottom and see what we have for examples. But this looks like a very long man page. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So these are some interesting examples. So like this is a really cool thing. You can do a ZFS diff of a snapshot and a file system and go look at the differences, which is pretty interesting idea. So looks like they get some nice snapshots here. We can go look at things like setting quotas. You can go set various different sort of permissions for individual users in terms of what they're allowed to go do on a particular file system. So that's kind of cool. So this is looking at some snapshot related stuff. R means recursive, so it'll go down the structure. And this is basically sending data. So you can do ZFS send, ZFS receive, and basically send data over the network that way. So it's kind of cool. All right. So, and then we can go do, let's say, var log, probably be a good one. Oh, wait, is that? Okay, so I forgot the R there. So now I can go ahead and do a ZFS snapshot list. I guess I got to give it the file system. So oh, so I bet that's how we see it. Memory serve. So we should say var log. Now, probably not the most exciting one in terms of videos, where I'm sort of looking at this snapshot. Hmm. So Alan's saying, I always forget sudo. Saying that I forgot sudo. And he's also saying that bear in mind the implementation of Ubuntu 20.04 is designed not to be poked at like this, but for to manage the pools in the background. That seems like a weird idea that they would not have you use it. I mean, I think it would just be a standard OpenZFS implementation, I would assume. So displaying and accessing ZFS snapshots. Pull get. So I need to set the property. Okay. Snapshots true are on. Okay. All right. Well, I probably will have to go back and maybe make a video on this specifically, because it's no fun for me to just kind of poke around with something and like not have you guys, not have you guys, you know, get any sort of real stuff out of it while I'm trying to go figure things out. Oh, interesting. Okay. So yeah, I'll have to go read up on it a little bit more. It's something that I knew had been integrated into the I think 1910, and then this one was sort of by default was available. But yeah, I think ZFS is really interesting. It's been a while since I've played with it a lot. Oh, that's why. Is it our pool? There we go. Oh, there we go. All right, great. So there we go and see our snapshot. So that's very cool. So yeah, so you can go ahead and use this as a great way to go ahead and take snapshots and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll have to go back and sort of read up on my ZFS stuff. It's been a while since I've been playing with it. Generally what I do is I just sort of script out a couple different things to sort of take and recover from snapshots as part of like installing new packages and stuff, which is one of the things I really hope that they do. So probably what I would do is with this is I'll probably like make a little wrapper for apt, so that anytime I'm going to go and do a new install of a package, it automatically creates a new snapshot, and then potentially just sort of ages those out, which is you know, a really quick and easy way to be able to go ahead and roll back any packages that you have problems with, things like that. I know I've used etc keeper in the past, which is sort of like a similar idea that uses Git, which is perfectly capable of you know, most of it. But it's nice to be able to go now potentially the binaries also included as well. So that's a really cool thing. I think that this is definitely something that I'm excited about being in the newest version of Ubuntu. The other thing that I think is going to be really interesting is the adoption of snap packages and Docker in the last 5, 6, 7 years, but really sort of ramping up sort of exponentially in the last few years, especially with snap packages and such. I'm curious to see how much of a difference that is going to make on the ease of upgrading systems. Going from the previous LTS release to this LTS release. One of the things that's historically been a bit of a hassle is developers would target a particular version of an operating system, and then you would have the new version of the operating system come out, and then the developers would need to have some time in order to go ahead and be running on that new version before they got their software working. So you had this sort of like, this sort of imbalance where the new version would come out, but you wouldn't want to go to it because the software wouldn't be ready, which means that you wouldn't want to go to it. So you had this sort of, which means that the software wouldn't be ready. So you had this sort of cyclical kind of thing. But with snap packages, including all of their dependencies, as much as I have a kind of love-hate relationship with snap packages, just because they're so goddamn messy, do them out and just like, oh god, I can't even see anything. The idea is very beneficial. The other thing that I think is going to be a big difference is on the server side, is so many people have moved to containerizing their applications that they're really kind of isolated from the underlying operating system. So when they're running, Ubuntu 20.04 LTS, or 16.04 LTS or SUSE, if I'm running my applications, my programs in Docker as containers, who cares? Like, it doesn't really matter. Obviously, there's going to be some, new things that get included. There'll be, changes to C groups and things like that sort of come down the pipeline. Yeah, I just usually just grept HV, but no, it's yeah, and C groups are another one that they make me crazy too with the amount of stuff, but they are very useful. So there's a lot of really neat stuff that you can that you get from having those things available. That I'm curious to see how it's going to go impact the upgrade cycle for Ubuntu LTS. So it sounds like we've got some folks in here that have been doing this stuff for a while. So out of curiosity, just so for the new folks can kind of get an idea of this as well, how long do you guys typically wait when a new release comes out before jumping on it? Are you guys like a point release type, or are you guys desktop, right away? Or are you guys, wait like a year, 6 months, kind of just to get an idea of what other people do? I always like to be a little bit behind. For me, the people who, like, if you go look at like Unix porn, if you're familiar with that, it's like if you go to Reddit/r/Unix porn, of all these people with like really fancy, cool looking desktops. Let me go ahead and see if I'll pull this up real quick. You can see all these sort of, desktops that look like, nice and stuff. The ones that I always think are really cool are when I see somebody who's using like an ancient version of Motif, or like CDE, or like Window Maker. OpenBox is pretty old school, something like that, where these look really nice and pretty. But if I see one that looks really old school, to me, what that means is this person has not had to change their workflow in like 10, 15 years, which means they're probably really efficient at getting stuff done. So Alan is saying, I used to stick to LTS, but now I moved forward early in development. I switched to 20.04 a couple months ago. Okay, that's interesting. Cool. So are you doing that mainly for like desktop stuff, or are you doing it for servers as well? And then Kev runs on Dunkin', which I wish I could say the same, but I'm in California, which means there's like 2 Dunkin' Donuts in the state, which is a vast improvement from when I first moved out here from Boston. Saying, well, I'm on Arch, so the kernel breaks something, I'm aware immediately. 5.6.1, for example, broke Wi-Fi, so I had to hold off on installing that. So it was fixed immediately in 5.6.2. So I think overall things don't break for him. So yeah, I sort of have a love-hate relationship with rolling releases. I think one of my favorite distributions, so probably my 2 favorite distributions aside from Ubuntu are SUSE and FreeBSD, both of which have rolling release support. So Tumbleweed, for example, is a rolling release, and it's been doing that for quite a while. And then FreeBSD is like the OG when it comes to rolling release stuff. Yeah, I can definitely see the benefits, but I tend to be more server oriented. So only desktop servers are all on 18.04. Yeah. Oh, okay. Right on. So Alan's saying I work for Canonical and Ubuntu, so it's a good idea to drink our own champagne before the release. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense. I bet we know some people in common. So for servers either CentOS or Debian, I need to learn CentOS, but I've been too lazy. Yeah, it's not that different, honestly. Slightly different package management, slightly different location to config files, but not too massive. That's one of the things I really like about SUSE, just because I find it really funny, is if you distro hop a lot, one of the things that you'll end up doing is you'll type the wrong package manager command. So you'll do like an apt install when you're on like an RPM based system, or you'll type like a yum when it's using DNF or whatever it is. And Zipper, which is the package manager that SUSE uses, will just convert whatever command you wanted into its own format. So if you type an apt install, it just is like, hey, you're supposed to do Zipper, and then it just does the command that you're supposed to use, which I always thought was kind of funny. So, all right, cool. So that was just a really kind of quick little kind of walkthrough of the sort of first look of the Ubuntu 20.04 LTS beta release. So that is not the final version yet. And I gotta say, it does seem very stable. I've had this running in another VM for a couple days now, and seems completely fine. Works really, really nicely. I'm always pretty conservative, so I'm probably going to wait a little while to go upgrade to it. But it does seem really nice and really polished. And yeah, so if you're thinking about jumping over to it, I think the ZFS stuff is potentially a pretty good reason to jump over to it. I think the idea that they've had live patch now for a while is pretty promising. I think most of the other vendors are adopting it now, but I think for a while it was basically Canonical and SUSE that were the two that were sort of enterprise level distributions that were supporting live patch, and I think the SUSE one they required you to pay money for it, so or at least have the supported version. So I think those are both some pretty interesting features. So I would not hesitate to say that if you're interested in jumping over to it, it's certainly worth looking at. Again, if this is going to be production systems or your production desktop where you're trying to make money off of things, I think it's probably a good idea to try it in a VM for a little bit, and then be able to kind of validate that it's going to be stable for your particular workflow, because a lot of times people blame the operating system, but when it comes to the idea of your environment, 80% of it's the applications, right? So if your application has not been updated for the release that you're running on, that's potentially something that could cause some instability. And I think that's one of the big things that Snap and flat packages, or Flatpaks, are there to sort of address, is the idea that they can sort of containerize your application and sort of isolate it from things like changes in libraries and such. So yeah, definitely give it a look. A couple other things that I do want to mention is I am sort of thinking about doing that introduction of Linux class as sort of a freebie. The other thing that I think would be really nice, and it's something that I'm going to try to go do myself, but I would love to see other people do, is when I kind of start getting that stuff set up, it'd be really cool if we had some mentors for people who are getting into Linux, to be able to sort of give them career advice and sort of just help them along. So if anybody is interested in potentially doing something like that, you can email me. My email address is, I think it's on all my videos in the description, but just in case it's not, it's Nick at nicholasbernstein.com, and just put like mentor in the subject, And then once I sort of figure out how I want to go ahead and do those free classes and kind of get this stuff set up, I'll sort of ping you, and then maybe we'll be able to go ahead and sort of set you up to be able to go work with, one or maybe a couple of different people. So yeah. So anyway, I think we'll wrap it up for the stream. Although if anybody has any questions on anything that they want to sort of chat about or discuss, you guys are welcome to sort of jump into the chat and ask any questions. But I think we've been going over a little bit over an hour, so it looks like an hour and 15 minutes or so. So I think we'll probably go ahead and wrap the stream up. But thank you guys so much for jumping on and attending. It's fun for me to be able to go ahead and try this as a kind of way to interact with people. So, it's definitely something that lets me sort of interact with people. I'm very glad to see that we've got a decent number of folks joining us. Last time I think we had 2 people. This time we have 11, which is a small number to be sure, but it's pretty cool. So I think we'll probably shoot for some time around this as we kind of continue on throughout the quarantine, just to kind of give folks something to go ahead and do, and be able to sort of get some good sort of tech socialization, which is something that we can all use, I'm sure. So anyway, looks like we're not getting any kind of questions and stuff in the chat, but thank you guys for coming, and I will see you guys next week, if not before then, in a separate video. But I think we'll try to make this live stream thing a regular sort of Sunday occurrence. So have a great rest of your day, rest of your weekend. Try to go use your time in this quarantine productively. This is a weird thing that's going on. In many ways, it sucks, and in many ways, it's not a good thing. It's not fun. There's a lot of scary stuff that's going on, but there's also an upside. And one of the big upside is we are able to go ahead and have time to do things, to try things, and that's unusual. So we're in a position where we're literally being told, don't go outside, right? We're stuck here anyway. So if you haven't learned Python and you've always wanted to learn Python, now's a good time to go learn Python. If you're somebody who wants to go get a certification, I forget who said it, but somebody was saying that they were studying for the LPI exam. Good on you. Like, this is the time to do that. Go look for certs. Go study up on stuff. Come up with projects. It's these are the times to be doing those things, because we're forced to stay inside anyway. We have a bunch of time on our hands, and the fact of the matter is that the economy is going to almost certainly be in a recession once we get out of this. So anything that you can do to make your resume look better, to get more experience, that you can sort of tout when looking for jobs, or to give your manager or employer more reasons to keep you on, is a good idea. Now, that's not me trying to pimp you to take training from me, right? There's a lot of free resources. One of which I want to point out, I was on a call with Google, not last week, but the week before. And one of the really cool things that Google is doing, love them or hate them as a company, but one of the really cool things that they're doing is they're making all of their Google Cloud Platform Quick Lab stuff available for free for the next 6 months. Now, that directly goes against my best interest to tell you, because I teach classes for Google on the Google Cloud Platform stuff now. But given the situation that we're going through, if you are kind of getting into tech, cloud is really, 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 really good to have on your resume. And there is there's a ton of free material out there that they're just giving away absolutely for free. And to so it's something to look at. So check out those. And yeah, hopefully you guys do something productive with your time. I'm going to shut up now. I never know how to end these things, but thank you guys so much for coming. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next week.